Fact 1. What cognitive biases are in psychology? Ever notice how two people can see the same situation completely differently? Cognitive biases are systematic errors in thinking. They affect how we process information and make decisions. These mental patterns happen automatically without us realizing it. Psychologists have identified over 180 different cognitive biases. Each one changes how we see reality in a specific way. Some make us overconfident while others make us too cautious. These biases aren't random mistakes. They follow predictable patterns that show up again and again. Everyone experiences them regardless of intelligence or education level. Think of biases as filters over your brain. They color every thought and decision you make throughout the day. You can't completely remove them because they're built into how thinking works. Researchers study these patterns to understand human behavior better. They affect everything from shopping choices to relationships. Even experts who know about biases still fall for them regularly. Understanding cognitive biases helps explain why people act in ways that seem illogical. The human brain isn't designed to be perfectly rational. It's designed to survive and make fast choices. Fact 2. Why our brains use mental shortcuts. Your brain processes about 11 million bits of information every second. That's an overwhelming amount of data coming from your eyes, ears, and other senses, but your conscious mind can only handle about 40 bits per second. There's a huge gap between what comes in and what you can actually process. Mental shortcuts help bridge this gap. They let your brain make decisions without analyzing every detail. This filtering system runs constantly in the background of your mind. Without these shortcuts, simple tasks would take forever. Imagine analyzing every option when choosing breakfast or getting dressed. You'd be mentally exhausted before leaving home. These shortcuts developed because efficiency matters for survival. Quick decisions often beat perfect decisions when time is limited. Your ancestors who hesitated too long didn't pass on their genes. The brain prioritizes speed over accuracy in most situations. It assumes that being roughly right quickly is better than being exactly right slowly. This trade-off usually works well in daily life. Fact 3. How biases help us make quick decisions. You make about 35,000 decisions every single day. Most of these happen so fast you don't even notice them. Should you step left or right? Which words should you say next? Your brain decides in milliseconds. Biases act like pre-programmed responses for common situations. They let you skip the analysis phase and jump straight to action. This saves tremendous mental energy throughout the day. Pattern recognition is one way biases speed things up. Your brain matches new situations to old memories and responds accordingly. This works especially well for repeated daily tasks. Sometimes quick decisions matter more than perfect ones. If you see a car coming, you don't calculate its exact speed. Your brain just tells you to move immediately. These mental shortcuts work correctly most of the time. That's why your brain keeps using them despite occasional errors. The benefits of speed usually outweigh the cost of mistakes. Your survival depends on making thousands of automatic choices. Biases make this possible by handling routine decisions without conscious effort. Fact 4. The evolutionary origins of cognitive biases. Human brains evolved over millions of years in very different environments. Our ancestors lived in small groups on African savannas. They faced immediate physical dangers like predators and hostile tribes. Their brains adapted to solve these specific survival problems. Many cognitive biases trace back to these ancient challenges. Fear responses developed to avoid threats quickly. Social biases helped people identify trustworthy group members versus outsiders. The environment changed faster than human evolution could keep up. We now live in cities with technology and abstract problems, but our brains still use Stone Age programming for modern situations. Negativity bias made our ancestors focus on dangers over opportunities. One missed threat could mean death, while one missed berry bush meant little. This imbalance kept the cautious ones alive longer. Quick judgments about people helped with survival decisions. Determining friend or foe in seconds mattered more than being completely accurate. These snap judgments became hardwired over generations. Our modern world requires different thinking skills than our ancestors needed. Yet we're stuck with mental tools designed for a world that no longer exists. Fact 5. Confirmation. Bias makes us seek supporting evidence. Have you ever noticed how you always find proof that you're right? Confirmation bias makes people search for information that supports their existing beliefs. They actively look for evidence that confirms what they already think. At the same time, they ignore or dismiss contradicting information. This happens completely automatically in your daily life. If you believe a restaurant is good, you notice positive reviews and overlook negative ones. Your brain literally filters out information that challenges your view. People don't do this to be stubborn or dishonest. The brain genuinely processes confirming evidence more easily than opposing evidence. It feels more believable and makes more sense automatically. This bias affects everything from politics to personal relationships. Once you form an opinion about someone, you keep finding reasons to justify it. Even neutral actions get interpreted as supporting your initial judgment. Scientists have to design careful experiments to avoid confirmation bias in research. They create systems that force them to consider all evidence equally. Without these safeguards, even trained researchers fall into this trap. Your social media feeds make confirmation bias even stronger today. Algorithms show you content matching your existing interests and beliefs. Fact 6. How confirmation bias affects daily choices. Think about the last time you bought something online. You probably read reviews before making the purchase. But confirmation bias influenced which reviews you actually believed. If you already wanted the product, positive reviews seemed more helpful and trustworthy. This bias shapes your shopping decisions every single day. You notice sale signs that match what you plan to buy anyway. You skip over deals on items you weren't already considering. Confirmation bias affects your work choices too. When you prefer one solution to a problem, you focus on reasons it will succeed. You downplay the risks or challenges that might come up later. Your relationships run on this bias constantly. If you like someone, you interpret their actions generously. That same behavior from someone you dislike seems rude or inconsiderate. Even choosing what to eat involves confirmation bias. You remember the times a restaurant was great and forget the mediocre visits. This keeps you going back to the same places repeatedly. The bias makes you feel confident about your choices. Your brain shows you evidence that you decided correctly. This feels good, but it doesn't mean your decision was actually the best option available. Fact 7. Anchoring bias locks onto first information received. The first number you hear changes everything that comes after. Anchoring bias makes your brain fixate on initial information. This first piece of data becomes a reference point for all later judgments. Everything else gets compared to that original anchor. Retailers use this bias constantly in their pricing strategies. They show you a high original price crossed out next to the sale price. That first number makes the discount seem much better than it actually is. This happens even when the anchor is completely random. Studies show that people asked if Gandhi died before or after age 140 give different estimates than those asked about age 9. The absurd number still influences their thinking. Negotiations always start with someone throwing out the first number. That opening offer becomes the anchor for the entire discussion. Even if both sides know it's unreasonable, it pulls the final agreement toward it. Your brain can't ignore anchors even when you know about the bias. The first information creates a mental starting point automatically. You then adjust from there, but usually not enough to escape its influence. Anchoring works with all types of information, not just numbers. First impressions, initial descriptions, and opening statements all create powerful anchors. Fact 8. Why initial numbers influence our judgments. Your brain treats the first number as a clue about what's normal. When you see an initial price or value, your mind uses it to estimate a reasonable range. Other numbers then seem high or low based on that starting point. This happens instantly before conscious thought kicks in. The adjustment process is where the bias really happens. People start from the anchor and move toward what seems correct, but they almost always stop adjusting too soon and stay too close to the original number. Real estate agents know this principle extremely well. The listing price of a house shapes all future offers and counteroffers. Even buyers who research comparable homes can't fully escape the pull of that initial number. Salary negotiations demonstrate this effect clearly. The first number mentioned, whether by employer or candidate, anchors the entire conversation. Both sides end up closer to that figure than they might have otherwise. Your brain uses less mental energy when it has an anchor. Instead of reevaluating something from scratch, it just adjusts from the given starting point. This shortcut saves effort but reduces accuracy significantly. Random anchors work just as well as relevant ones. Your brain grabs onto whatever number appears first regardless of its actual connection to the decision. Fact 9. Availability heuristic relies on easy memories. Whatever comes to mind first feels most important. The availability heuristic makes your brain judge frequency and probability by how easily examples pop up. If you can quickly think of instances of something, you assume it happens often. Difficult to recall events seem rare regardless of actual statistics. This explains why people fear plane crashes more than car accidents. Plane crashes get massive media coverage and stick in memory. Car accidents happen daily, but each one gets less attention and fades quickly. Your personal experiences create especially strong availability. If you know someone who got sick from a certain food, you'll overestimate that risk. That one vivid memory outweighs all the times people ate it safely. Recent events feel more common because they're easier to remember. A local crime makes people think their neighbourhood suddenly became dangerous. The actual crime rate might be unchanged or even declining. Dramatic or emotional events stick in memory better than ordinary ones. This makes unusual occurrences seem more frequent than they really are. Your brain confuses memorable with common. The heuristic works quickly, but trades accuracy for speed. It's easier to recall examples than to look up actual data or statistics. Fact 10. How recent events feel more common. Yesterday feels more real than last month. Recent memories come to mind much faster than older ones. This makes recent events seem more typical or representative of how things usually go. Your brain mistakes recency for frequency without realizing it. If it rained 3 days in a row, you feel like it always rains. Even if the past month was mostly sunny, those recent days dominate your perception. The older memories fade into the background. This bias affects how you judge other people's behavior. Someone who was rude to you yesterday seems like a rude person overall. You forget the 20 times before when they acted perfectly friendly. News cycles exploit this tendency constantly. Whatever happened today feels like the most important trend or crisis. Last week's headlines already seem less urgent even if nothing actually changed. Your mood right now makes recent similar experiences easier to recall. Feeling happy brings up happy memories, which makes life seem generally good. Feeling down does the opposite with negative memories. Stock market investors fall into this trap regularly. A few recent gains make them think the market always goes up. Recent losses make them overly pessimistic about future returns. Fact 11. Representativeness. Heuristic judges by stereotypes. Someone wearing a lab coat walks by carrying thick books. Your brain immediately guesses they're a scientist or doctor. This happens because they match your mental image of what those professionals look like. The representativeness heuristic makes you judge based on how well something fits a stereotype. This shortcut ignores actual probability completely. There are far more students than scientists in most places, but your brain focuses on the match to the stereotype instead of base rates. People use this heuristic when meeting new individuals constantly. You size someone up based on their appearance and behavior, then you categorize them into types you recognize. The classic example involves a shy poetry lover. Most guess librarian rather than farmer, despite farmers being far more common. Fact 12. Why we misjudge probability using patterns. Your brain wasn't designed to understand statistics naturally. Humans evolved to spot patterns for survival purposes. Recognizing that rustling grass might mean danger kept ancestors alive. But this pattern-seeking ability works terribly for calculating actual probabilities. When you see a streak or pattern, your brain assumes it means something. 3 heads in a row makes you expect tails next. But each coin flip has exactly the same odds, regardless of what came before. People bet on lottery numbers that haven't appeared recently. They think those numbers are due to come up soon. Each draw is actually independent with identical odds every time. The pattern-seeking urge is so strong you see meaning in randomness. Stock charts show patterns that seem predictive but are often just noise. Fact 13. Hindsight bias makes past events seem obvious. After something happens, you feel like you knew it all along. Hindsight bias changes your memory of what you thought before the event. Once you know the outcome, you remember being more certain about it than you actually were. The past feels predictable even when it wasn't. This happens with everything from sports games to elections. After your team loses, you remember thinking they would lose, but your texts before the game show you predicted a win. People say they saw economic crashes coming after they happen, but very few actually move their money beforehand. The outcome makes warning signs seem clearer than they appeared at the time. This bias makes learning from mistakes harder. You think the right choice was obvious, so you don't analyze carefully. Fact 14. How? Knowing outcomes changes memory perception. Your memory isn't a video recording of the past. It's constantly being rewritten based on what you know now. Learning an outcome actually alters how you remember the events leading up to it. Your brain edits the story to make the ending seem logical. People involved in accidents remember seeing warning signs they probably didn't notice originally. The crash makes them reconstruct memory to include those details. The new version feels completely real and accurate. This explains why witnesses give different testimonies. Each person's memory gets shaped by information learned afterward. News reports and conversations change what they remember seeing. Doctors reviewing patient cases fall into this trap. Knowing the diagnosis makes earlier symptoms seem more significant. They forget how ambiguous those symptoms appeared before test results. Fact 15. Overconfidence bias inflates our abilities. Most people think they're above average at most things. Overconfidence bias makes you rate your abilities higher than they actually are. This happens across nearly every skill from driving to intelligence. Your self-assessment exceeds objective measurements consistently. Studies show 93% of American drivers rate themselves as above average. That's mathematically impossible since average means the middle point. But nearly everyone believes they're better than most other drivers. This bias affects professionals just as much as regular people. Doctors overestimate diagnostic accuracy, and lawyers overestimate case success rates. Expertise doesn't protect you from overconfidence about your skills. People are especially overconfident about tasks they perform regularly. Familiarity breeds false certainty about competence. You confuse doing something often with doing it well. Fact 16. Why people overestimate their knowledge. You probably know less than you think you know. People consistently rate their understanding of how things work higher than actual knowledge. Ask someone to explain how a zipper works in detail. Most discover they only had a vague sense despite using zippers daily. This illusion comes from familiarity feeling like understanding. You've seen toilets, bicycles, and locks countless times. Your brain mistakes recognition for comprehension of underlying mechanisms. The internet makes this worse by putting information at your fingertips. You feel knowledgeable because you can look things up quickly. But accessing information isn't the same as actually knowing it. People overestimate knowledge most in areas they care about deeply. Political opinions feel well informed even when based on limited facts. Emotional investment creates false certainty. Fact 17. Dunning-Kruger effect shows incompetence breeds confidence. People who know the least often feel the most certain. The Dunning-Kruger effect describes how inexperienced people dramatically overestimate their abilities. Beginners lack the knowledge to recognize what they don't know. This ignorance makes them feel more confident than people with actual expertise. Someone who just learned basic guitar thinks they're pretty good. They don't yet understand all the techniques they haven't mastered. Their ignorance of advanced concepts prevents recognizing their beginner status. This appears strongest in complex fields requiring significant expertise. Anyone can have opinions about politics or health, but few understand underlying complexities. The less someone knows, the simpler topics seem. Incompetent people not only overestimate themselves, but fail to recognize actual competence in others. They can't evaluate skill accurately. Fact 18. How skilled people often underestimate themselves. True experts tend to doubt themselves more than beginners do. Skilled people understand how much depth exists in their field. This knowledge makes them aware of everything they still don't know. Their expertise reveals vast complexity that beginners can't perceive. Experienced professionals hedge statements with qualifications and uncertainties. They know most situations have exceptions and complications. Beginners speak in absolutes because they haven't encountered nuances. This creates an ironic situation where knowledgeable people sound less confident. They say, "It depends," while novices make bold declarations. Audiences often mistake this caution for ignorance. Experts also assume tasks easy to them are easy for everyone. They forget how much practice built their current skill. This makes them underestimate their own abilities compared to average performers. Fact 19. Fundamental attribution error. Blames character over situation. Someone cuts you off in traffic and you think they're a terrible person. The fundamental attribution error makes you blame people's character for their behavior. You ignore situational factors that might explain their actions. Their personality seems like the obvious cause instead of circumstances. When someone acts rude, you assume they're a rude person. You don't consider they might have just received bad news. The behavior feels like it reveals their true nature rather than current state. This error happens because you can't see other people's situations clearly. You observe their action but not the pressures surrounding it. Your brain fills this gap by assuming their character caused the behavior. People apply this differently to themselves versus others. When you make a mistake, you blame the situation. When someone else makes the same mistake, you blame their personality. Fact 20. Why we judge others differently than ourselves. You give yourself the benefit of the doubt constantly. When explaining your own behavior, you naturally consider the full situation. You know your intentions, pressures, and circumstances. This complete picture makes your actions seem reasonable and justified. But you don't have that same information about other people. You see their behavior without knowing their thoughts or situation. This information gap leads to very different judgments about identical actions. You're late because traffic was terrible and your alarm failed. Someone else is late because they are irresponsible and don't respect other people's time. The same outcome gets completely different explanations. This double standard happens automatically without conscious intention. Your brain has access to your internal reasoning but must guess at others' motivations. It defaults to assuming their character caused their behavior. Fact 21. Self-serving bias credits. Success to ourselves. You aced that test because you're smart and studied hard. Self-serving bias makes you take credit for positive outcomes while distancing yourself from negative ones. Successes reflect your abilities and effort. This protects your self-esteem and maintains a positive self-image throughout life. When you get a promotion at work, you attribute it to your skills and dedication. Your hard work paid off and you earned the recognition. The bias makes you focus on internal factors that highlight your competence. Athletes demonstrate this clearly after games. Winning players talk about their preparation and skill execution. They emphasize what they did right to achieve victory. Personal qualities get highlighted as the main reasons. Students show the same pattern with good grades. High scores result from intelligence and studying effectively. The bias makes you remember the effort you put in. Fact 22. How we blame external factors for failures. You failed that test because it was unfairly difficult. When things go wrong, your brain looks for external explanations immediately. The test was poorly written or covered material never taught. Traffic made you late, not your time management. Outside circumstances seem responsible for negative outcomes. This protects your ego from the pain of accepting personal failure. Blaming external factors feels less threatening than questioning your own abilities. The bias shields you from damage to your self-esteem. Team projects show this pattern repeatedly. When the group fails, each member blames someone else or the circumstances. Nobody wants to accept responsibility for the poor outcome. External factors seem obviously at fault. Athletes who lose highlight bad referee calls or unlucky bounces. They mention injuries or unfair advantages the opponent had. Fact 23. Sunk cost fallacy keeps us invested unwisely. You've already spent 2 hours watching a boring movie. The sunk cost fallacy makes you continue because of what you already invested. Leaving feels like wasting those 2 hours, so you sit through another hour of boredom trying to justify the time already spent. This happens with money even more powerfully than time. You bought an expensive gym membership, so you force yourself to go. The money's already gone regardless of whether you continue, but your brain can't ignore the past investment. Businesses fall into this trap with failing projects constantly. Millions already spent on development make companies pour in more money. They hope to recover the initial investment somehow. The project keeps consuming resources long after cancellation should happen. Relationships demonstrate this bias clearly too. People stay in unsatisfying partnerships because of years already invested together. Fact 24. Why past investments? Cloud future decisions. Every dollar you spent yesterday whispers in your ear today. Past investments create emotional attachment that distorts logical thinking. You feel obligated to previous choices even when circumstances changed. The history of what you invested becomes more important than current reality. Someone buys an expensive car that constantly needs repairs. Rational analysis says sell it and buy something reliable. But they keep repairing because selling feels like losing the initial purchase price. Each repair is compared to that original investment. This explains why people finish books they hate. You're 200 pages in and don't want those hours wasted. The future pages won't get better, but you push through anyway. The past reading time controls your current choice. Career paths show this pattern over years. Someone spends 5 years becoming a lawyer, then realizes they hate it. Fact 25. Loss. Aversion makes losses feel bigger. Losing $20 hurts more than finding $20 feels good. Loss aversion means negative experiences have roughly twice the psychological impact of positive ones. Your brain treats losses as more significant than equivalent gains. This asymmetry shapes countless decisions throughout your day. People will take bigger risks to avoid losses than to achieve gains. Gambling to recover lost money feels more compelling than gambling to win extra. The pain of losing drives more extreme behavior than the pleasure of winning. This explains why people hold on to losing stocks too long. Selling locks in the loss and makes it real. Holding on to it maintains hope of recovery. The potential loss feels worse than the potential gain from moving money elsewhere. Negotiations reveal this bias in action. Both sides fear losing more than they desire winning. Fact 26. How fear of losing outweighs. Gaining. You'll work harder to keep what you have than to get something new. The fear of loss motivates behavior more powerfully than the hope of gain. People exert more effort avoiding losses than pursuing equivalent benefits. This drives everything from work habits to relationship choices. Employees worry more about losing their job than getting a promotion. The fear keeps them compliant even when advancement opportunities exist. Potential losses loom larger in decision-making than potential improvements. Marketing uses this principle constantly with limited-time offers. The fear of missing out creates urgency that desire alone wouldn't generate. Losing the opportunity hurts more than gaining the product helps. Homeowners refuse to sell houses for less than they paid originally. Taking a loss feels unbearable even when the market changed. They'd rather wait years than accept the psychological pain. Fact 27. Framing effect changes choices. Through wording surgery has a 90% survival rate sounds great. Surgery has a 10% death rate sounds terrible. These statements contain identical information. But the different framing dramatically changes how people respond. Word choice shapes decisions more than the underlying facts. Describing something in terms of gains versus losses flips preferences completely. People accept a treatment described as saving 200 out of 600 lives. They reject the same treatment when it's described as letting 400 people die. Politicians and marketers exploit this constantly with careful language selection. Tax relief sounds better than tax cuts. Climate change sounds less urgent than climate crisis. The frame controls emotional response. Food labels show framing power clearly. 75% lean sounds healthier than 25% fat. The number is the same, but lean focuses on the positive aspect. Fact 28. Why presentation style alters our decisions. The same information presented differently creates opposite reactions. Your brain processes style and substance together without separating them. Professional-looking presentations feel more credible regardless of content quality. The packaging influences judgment just as much as the actual information presented. Simple, clear language makes ideas seem more true than complex wording. People trust statements they can understand easily. Complicated phrasing creates suspicion even when the content is identical. Processing fluency affects believability directly. Visual design impacts perceived value significantly. Products in attractive packaging seem higher quality. The actual item inside might be identical, but presentation changes willingness to pay. Aesthetics create assumptions about substance. Order of information matters more than people realize. Presenting positive points first versus last changes which ones people remember. Recency and primacy effects make position influence impact. Fact 29. Bandwagon effect follows the crowd's behavior. Everyone else is buying it, so it must be good. The bandwagon effect makes you adopt beliefs and behaviors because others have. Popularity itself becomes a reason to join in. Your brain uses the crowd as a guide for what's correct or valuable. Product reviews demonstrate this powerfully. Items with more reviews sell better even when average ratings are identical. The quantity of opinions matters as much as their content. Popularity breeds more popularity. Fashion trends work entirely on this principle. Certain styles become popular simply because others are wearing them. The inherent quality matters less than the social consensus. People adopt trends to fit in with the group. Investment bubbles happen when bandwagon effect takes over. Prices rise because prices are rising and everyone is buying. The underlying value becomes disconnected from market behavior. Fact 30. How group opinions influence individual thinking. Your opinions shift toward whatever position your group holds. Group influence operates constantly without you noticing it happening. The people around you shape what seems reasonable or normal. Their views become your reference point for judging ideas and behaviors automatically. Classic experiments show people deny obvious facts when groups insist otherwise. A line is clearly longer, but if everyone says it's shorter, many people agree. Social pressure overrides direct sensory evidence in the moment. Online communities create echo chambers through this effect. Everyone in the group shares similar views, which reinforces those beliefs. Alternative perspectives seem increasingly wrong or crazy. The group consensus feels like objective truth. Workplace cultures shape employee opinions about company practices. What seems acceptable depends entirely on group norms. The same behavior looks professional in one culture and unprofessional in another. Fact 31. Authority, bias, trusts. Experts without questioning. A doctor recommends a treatment and you accept it immediately. Authority bias makes you trust people with expertise or status without critical evaluation. Their credentials become a shortcut for deciding what's true. You assume they must be right simply because of their position. This happens across all areas of life from health to finance. An expert opinion carries weight regardless of whether you understand the reasoning. The title itself provides credibility that bypasses your normal skepticism. Famous experiments show people obey authority figures even when uncomfortable. Participants delivered what they thought were dangerous shocks because a researcher told them to. The lab coat and authority were enough to override moral concerns. This bias saves mental energy by letting you rely on others' expertise. But it also makes you vulnerable to misleading authorities. Fact 32. Why titles and credentials sway judgment. Someone introduces themselves as doctor and your attention shifts. Titles activate automatic respect and trust responses in your brain. The credential signals expertise without requiring any demonstration of knowledge. You assume competence based entirely on the label someone carries. Studies show people rate identical advice higher when attributed to someone with an impressive title. The same words from professor versus student create different levels of trust. Content becomes secondary to the speaker's credentials. This makes sense evolutionarily, since learning from experienced group members aided survival. But modern society has many irrelevant or misleading credentials. A PhD in literature doesn't make someone a health expert. Job titles within organizations carry this weight internally. VP opinions get more consideration than junior staff suggestions. The idea might be identical, but the title determines how seriously it's taken. Fact 33. Halo effect spreads. One trait. Across everything, someone is attractive, so you assume they're also intelligent and kind. The halo effect makes positive qualities in one area spread to unrelated characteristics. Your brain creates an overall positive impression that colors all judgments. One good trait generates assumptions about other completely separate traits. This happens instantly when meeting new people. Physical appearance creates a halo that affects perceptions of personality and competence. Attractive people seem smarter, friendlier, and more trustworthy without any evidence beyond looks. Brands use this by excelling in one visible area. A sleek product design makes people assume the company has excellent customer service too. The positive impression in one domain spreads across the entire brand. Teachers give better grades to students they like personally. The positive relationship creates a halo affecting academic evaluation. Fact 34. How physical attractiveness influences perceived competence. Better-looking people get hired more often for the same qualifications. Physical attractiveness creates powerful assumptions about ability and character. Your brain associates good looks with positive traits like intelligence and competence. This happens automatically without conscious intention or awareness. Studies show attractive people receive lighter criminal sentences for identical crimes. Juries unconsciously assume better-looking defendants are less likely to be guilty. Physical appearance influences judgments that should be completely objective. Workplace promotions favor attractive employees, even controlling for performance. Managers rate good-looking workers as more capable and deserving of advancement. The bias operates in supposedly merit-based evaluation systems. Students rate attractive teachers as more effective regardless of actual teaching quality. The appearance creates assumptions about knowledge and skill. Course evaluations reflect looks as much as educational value. Fact 35. Horn effect creates negative overall impressions. Someone is rude once and you assume they're a terrible person. The horn effect works as the opposite of the halo effect. One negative trait spreads to create an overall negative impression. Your brain assumes someone bad in one way is probably bad in other ways too. A single mistake at work can damage your entire professional reputation. That one error colours how people view all your other contributions. The negative impression spreads beyond the specific failure to general competence. Physical unattractiveness triggers assumptions of negative personality traits. People judge less, attractive individuals as less intelligent, trustworthy, and capable. This happens despite no logical connection between appearance and these qualities. First impressions demonstrating one weakness create lasting damage. Arriving late to a meeting makes people assume you're generally disorganized and unreliable. That initial negative spreads to all future interactions. Fact 36. Why one flaw? Colors. All other qualities. Your brain craves consistency in how it views people and things. A single negative trait feels like it must connect to other negatives. Random combinations of good and bad qualities seem unlikely or incoherent. So your mind looks for patterns that match the initial negative impression. Someone who dresses sloppily gets judged as having poor work quality too. The visible flaw suggests invisible flaws in other areas. Your brain fills gaps with assumptions that match the negative starting point. This explains why scandals destroy entire reputations so completely. One revealed flaw makes people reinterpret everything else negatively. Past accomplishments get dismissed or explained away. The single negative becomes the lens for viewing everything. Product reviews demonstrate this clearly. One bad feature makes people rate other unrelated features more negatively. A phone with poor battery life gets lower scores on camera quality. Fact 37. Recency bias remembers latest information best. The last thing someone said is the first thing you remember. Recency bias makes the most recent information disproportionately influential in your memory. What happened last feels most important regardless of what came before. Your brain weighs recent events more heavily in judgments. Job interviews demonstrate this powerfully. Candidates interviewed late in the day have an advantage over equally qualified earlier candidates. The most recent impression stays freshest in the interviewer's mind during decision-making. Performance reviews focus heavily on the last few months rather than the entire year. Recent accomplishments or mistakes dominate the evaluation. Earlier performance fades from memory even though it's equally relevant to overall assessment. This explains why closing arguments matter so much in trials. The final message to the jury stays most accessible in their minds. Lawyers structure presentations knowing recency will shape the ultimate verdict. Fact 38. How final impressions override. Earlier data. The ending of an experience determines how you remember the whole thing. Your brain summarizes experiences based heavily on how they ended. A vacation with a terrible last day gets remembered negatively overall. The final impression overrides many good days that came before it. Movies understood this principle long ago. A strong ending makes audiences forgive earlier weak sections. The last 10 minutes shape the entire review, more than the previous 2 hours combined. Medical procedures feel worse when pain increases at the end. Patients prefer longer procedures with declining pain over shorter ones with increasing pain. The final moments dominate memory of the entire experience. Restaurants' no dessert matters enormously for overall satisfaction. An excellent final course makes diners remember the meal positively. The ending creates the lasting impression that drives return visits. Fact 39. Primacy effect favours information. Encountered. First impressions stick even when later information contradicts them. The primacy effect makes initial information create a framework for processing everything that follows. What you learn first becomes the baseline for judging new data. Later information gets interpreted through that original lens. Meeting someone creates an immediate impression that's hard to change. If they seem unfriendly initially, you interpret neutral behaviours as confirming that impression. The first data point anchors all subsequent observations and judgments. Lists show this effect clearly. You remember items at the beginning better than those in the middle. The first few entries get processed more deeply and stick in memory. Position matters as much as content. Advertising knows that brand impressions form quickly and persist stubbornly. First exposure to a company shapes all future perceptions. Later, marketing must work around that initial framework rather than starting fresh. Fact 40. Why opening statements shape overall judgment. The first thing you hear creates the story everything else must fit into. Opening statements in trials don't present evidence, but they shape how juries interpret everything that follows. The initial narrative becomes the framework. Later testimony gets organized into that story structure automatically. Presentations succeed or fail based on their openings. The first minute tells audiences whether to pay attention and trust the speaker. That judgment persists even if later content deserves different evaluation. Arguments in relationships often replay initial grievances. The first complaint stated frames the entire discussion. Later points get absorbed into that original issue rather than being heard independently. Product launches emphasize first impressions because they're nearly impossible to reverse. Initial reviews and reactions set expectations that color all future experiences. Later improvements must overcome that established perception. Fact 41. Status quo. Bias prefers keeping things unchanged. Most people stick with the default option even when better alternatives exist. Status quo bias makes you prefer current arrangements over changes. The existing situation feels safer and more comfortable than switching. Your brain treats change itself as a risk, even when logic says otherwise. This explains why people rarely switch banks despite better offers elsewhere. The effort and uncertainty of changing feels worse than accepting slightly inferior service. Staying put requires no decision or action, which appeals to your brain. Subscription. Services rely heavily on this bias. People keep paying for things they barely use rather than cancelling. The hassle of changing feels greater than the cost of continuing. Inertia wins over rational cost-benefit analysis. Political incumbents benefit from status quo bias in elections. Voters prefer known quantities over uncertain alternatives. The current leader has the advantage of being the default option. Change requires active choice, while staying the same requires nothing. Medical patients often refuse to switch treatments even when new options offer improvements. The current treatment is known and familiar. Switching introduces uncertainty that feels threatening regardless of potential benefits available. Your brain evolved to avoid unnecessary risks in stable environments. If things are working adequately, change could make them worse. This protective instinct now operates even in situations where change carries minimal actual risk and substantial upside. Fact 42. How familiarity creates resistance to change. The old way feels right simply because you're used to it. Familiarity breeds comfort that makes alternatives seem wrong or risky. Your brain processes familiar things more easily, which creates positive feelings. This ease gets mistaken for correctness or superiority over unfamiliar options. Keyboard layouts demonstrate this perfectly. QWERTY is inefficient, but alternatives never catch on. People know this layout, and learning a new one feels unnecessarily difficult. Familiarity trumps objective improvement in efficiency. Software updates frustrate users even when they add useful features. The familiar interface felt intuitive, and the new one requires learning. Change itself becomes annoying regardless of whether it's actually better or worse overall. Restaurants succeed by keeping menus relatively stable over time. Regular customers want their favorite dishes available consistently. New items feel like unwelcome changes rather than exciting additions. Familiarity creates customer loyalty and expectations. Your brain builds efficient processing pathways for repeated experiences. Using these pathways takes less energy than forming new ones. This efficiency creates preference independent of quality. The familiar path is literally easier for your brain to follow. This resistance grows stronger with age as familiar patterns become more deeply established. Older adults show stronger status quo bias than younger ones. The longer something has been familiar, the harder it becomes to embrace alternatives. Fact 43. Endowment effect. Overvalues. What we own. You wouldn't pay $20 for that mug, but you won't sell yours for less than $30. The endowment effect makes you value things more highly simply because you own them. Possession increases perceived worth beyond objective market value. Your stuff feels more valuable than identical items belonging to others. Classic experiments demonstrate this with random assignment of objects. People, given a coffee mug, demand much more money to sell it than others offer to buy it. Ownership creates a value gap that shouldn't exist for identical items. This explains why people struggle to throw away useless possessions. That old shirt has minimal value, but getting rid of it feels like losing something precious. Ownership creates emotional attachment that inflates perceived worth dramatically. Home sellers consistently price houses above market value. Their emotional connection and ownership history make the property seem more valuable. Buyers without that attachment see realistic market prices. The gap causes many deals to fall through. Trading and bartering becomes difficult because both sides overvalue what they're giving up. Each person's possession feels more valuable than the other person's equivalent item. This asymmetry makes fair trades feel unfair to both parties. Your brain treats losses of owned items as more painful than equivalent gains. Giving up something you possess activates loss aversion powerfully. The ownership itself changes how your brain processes the item's value completely. Fact 44. Why possessions feel more valuable than identical items. Your coffee mug isn't special, but it feels special to you. Ownership creates psychological connection that exists independent of objective qualities. The item becomes part of your extended identity. This emotional bond increases perceived value beyond what the object itself warrants. Memory and experience get attached to possessions over time. Your old car isn't just transportation, but a collection of moments. These associations make it feel irreplaceable, even though any similar car would function identically. The effort invested in acquiring something increases its perceived value. You worked hard for that purchase or gift. The effort story becomes part of the item's meaning. Letting go feels like wasting that investment. Customization and personalization amplify the endowment effect dramatically. Once you've modified something to your preferences, it feels uniquely yours. The customization creates value that exists only in your perception, not in market terms. Your brain processes owned items differently than similar unowned items. Neurological studies show different activation patterns when viewing your possessions versus identical objects. The ownership status literally changes how your brain evaluates worth. This effect makes negotiation and trade inherently difficult. Objective value should be the same, regardless of who owns something. But subjective experience of ownership creates genuine value differences in people's minds. Both sides feel they're giving up more than they're getting. Fact 45. Choice. Supportive bias. Justifies past decisions. That restaurant you picked was definitely the right choice. Choice supportive bias makes you remember your decisions as better than they actually were. After choosing, your brain highlights positive aspects and downplays negatives. This retroactive justification protects your self-image as a good decision maker. Once you buy a car, you notice its good features more. You also start finding flaws in the models you didn't choose. Your brain reorganizes memories to support the choice you made. The decision gets justified after the fact. This happens even with random assignments. Studies show people rate randomly assigned options higher once they're told those are their assignments. The act of having something become yours triggers justification regardless of choice involvement. Major life decisions get especially strong justification. Your college choice, career path, or relationship feels right because you chose it. Doubts get suppressed and confirming evidence gets amplified. The bigger the commitment, the stronger the justification. This bias prevents you from learning from poor decisions effectively. Remembering choices as good means you don't analyze what went wrong. Future decisions repeat the same patterns because past mistakes get rewritten as successes. Your brain protects you from regret through this bias. Constantly second-guessing past choices would be psychologically painful. The bias maintains satisfaction and confidence by adjusting memory to match what you need to believe about yourself. Fact 46. How we remember choices as better than they were. Time makes your past decisions look wiser than they felt originally. Memory actively edits experiences to align with the choices you made. Negative aspects fade faster than positive ones for chosen options. Your brain curates the past to create a coherent narrative of good judgment. People remember their wedding day as more perfect than it actually was. Small disasters and stress get forgotten while happy moments get enhanced. The chosen decision to marry gets supported by improved memories of the event. Job choices demonstrate this clearly over time. Years later, people emphasize why their career path was right. They forget the doubts and alternatives that seemed equally appealing. The actual complexity of the decision gets simplified into obvious rightness. This memory reconstruction happens gradually without conscious awareness. Each time you recall a decision, the memory gets slightly altered. Over many recalls, the story shifts substantially from what really happened and how it felt. Photographs and journals reveal the gap between actual experience and remembered experience. Reading old diary entries shows doubts and problems you've completely forgotten. The written record contradicts your current confident memory of good choices. This bias serves important psychological functions. Constantly questioning past decisions would undermine confidence and create paralysis. The editing process lets you move forward without persistent regret weighing down every choice you've made throughout life. Fact 47. Blind spot. Bias sees others' biases, but not our own. Everyone else falls for biases, but you think clearly and objectively. Blind spot bias makes you recognize biased thinking in others while missing it in yourself. You notice when friends make irrational decisions, but your own choices feel perfectly logical. This creates a false sense of personal objectivity. Studies show people rate themselves as less biased than average. This is mathematically impossible for most people to achieve, yet nearly everyone believes they're more rational than their peers. The bias about biases affects everyone equally. Learning about cognitive biases doesn't eliminate this blind spot. Even psychologists who study biases professionally rate themselves as less susceptible. Knowledge about biases protects you less than you'd expect. Awareness doesn't equal immunity. You have explanations for your behavior that feel rational and justified. Others' similar behavior seems obviously biased because you don't have access to their reasoning. The information gap creates asymmetric judgment about identical actions. This bias makes personal growth difficult. You can't fix problems you don't see. If you believe you're already objective, why work on reducing bias? The blind spot prevents the self-awareness needed for improvement. Arguments persist partly because both sides think the other is biased. Each person sees their own position as fact-based and reasonable. The opponent's disagreement proves their bias and irrationality. Nobody thinks they're the biased party in a dispute. Fact 48. Why we think we're more objective than others. You have internal access to your own thoughts and reasoning. This inside view makes your decisions feel rational and justified. You know all the factors you considered and the logic you followed. The process feels thorough and unbiased from your internal perspective. Other people are black boxes you observe only from outside. You see their actions and conclusions, but not their reasoning process. Without that internal access, their decisions seem less justified. You fill gaps with assumptions about bias. Your own biases operate unconsciously below your awareness. You experience the outputs as objective thoughts, rather than biased processing. The automatic nature of biases makes them invisible to the person experiencing them. Only the final judgment reaches consciousness. Motivation also plays a role in this asymmetry. You have incentives to see yourself as rational and fair-minded, Admitting bias would threaten your self-image. Your brain protects you by making your biases invisible, while highlighting others' flaws. Disagreement itself gets interpreted as evidence of the other person's bias. If they reach different conclusions with the same information, something must be wrong with their thinking. Your answer feels obviously correct, so dissent proves their irrationality. This creates echo chambers where everyone thinks everyone else is biased. Each person occupies the center of their own objective universe. The inability to see your own blind spots makes productive disagreement nearly impossible in many contexts. Fact 49. Optimism. Bias expects better outcomes for ourselves. Bad things happen to other people, but probably not to you. Optimism bias makes you believe you're less likely to experience negative events than average. You'll probably avoid divorce, serious illness, and financial problems. These happen to others, but your future looks brighter than statistics suggest. This affects risk assessment in daily decisions. You text while driving because accidents happen to careless people. You skip insurance because you won't need it. The bias makes you underestimate personal vulnerability consistently. Most people believe they'll live longer than average life expectancy. This is mathematically impossible for the majority. Yet the bias persists across cultures and age groups. Everyone's personal future looks rosier than population averages. Entrepreneurs show extreme optimism bias about business success rates. Most new businesses fail within 5 years, but each founder believes their venture will succeed. This bias drives risk-taking that would seem irrational with accurate probability assessment. The bias serves important functions despite creating distorted views. Optimism motivates effort and persistence. Believing success is likely makes you try harder. Accurate pessimism might prevent you from attempting worthwhile but risky goals entirely. Wedding planning demonstrates this perfectly. Couples know divorce rates but believe they'll stay together. The optimism bias makes commitment possible. Focusing on failure probability would undermine the decision to marry someone in the first place. Fact 50. How we underestimate personal risks. You know the statistics, but they don't feel like they apply to you. Risk statistics describe populations, but your brain treats your personal case as special. You're more careful, smarter, or luckier than average. This makes general probabilities feel irrelevant to your specific situation and choices. Smokers acknowledge health risks while believing they personally will avoid cancer. The knowledge exists but doesn't translate into personal risk assessment. The bias creates a gap between knowing and feeling vulnerable. Financial planning suffers from risk underestimation. People save less for retirement than needed because distant problems feel unlikely. You'll probably stay employed and healthy. The optimism bias makes prudent preparation seem like unnecessary worry. Health screenings get delayed because serious illness happens to other people. Your symptoms are probably nothing serious. This underestimation of personal risk leads to dangerous delays in seeking medical care and catching problems early. Young people show especially strong risk underestimation. Experience hasn't yet contradicted their optimism. Bad outcomes still belong to statistics about others rather than lived personal reality. Age and experience gradually calibrate this bias toward accuracy. The bias prevents anxiety and depression about future risks. Accurate risk assessment for all possible negative outcomes would be psychologically crushing. The optimism bias protects mental health by maintaining unrealistic but comforting expectations about your personal future. Fact 51. Pessimism bias. Anticipates. Negative events for others. Other people's futures look riskier than your own. Pessimism bias makes you expect worse outcomes for others than for yourself. You believe they're more likely to face divorce, illness, or failure. This creates an asymmetry where your optimism doesn't extend to those around you. People predict that others will experience average or above average rates of negative events, but they exempt themselves from those same probabilities. Your friend will probably get in an accident, but you'll drive safely forever. This bias serves a social comparison function. Believing others face more problems makes your own situation seem better. It's a way of maintaining positive self-regard through downward comparison with imagined futures. The bias affects how you give advice. You warn others about risks you ignore in your own life. Their behavior seems reckless while yours seems reasonable. The same action gets evaluated completely differently based on who's doing it. Depression and anxiety can flip this bias. Pessimistic people expect bad outcomes for everyone, including themselves. But most people maintain the split where personal futures look bright, while others face statistical reality. This combination of personal optimism and general pessimism shapes social expectations. Fact 52. Why mood states affect future predictions. Feeling good right now makes tomorrow look brighter too. Your current emotional state colors predictions about the future. Happy moods generate optimistic forecasts, while sad moods create pessimistic expectations. The present feeling gets projected forward as if it predicts what's coming. This happens because your brain uses current state as information. How you feel now seems relevant to how things will go later. The emotional tone becomes data that shapes predictions, even though it's actually unrelated. Studies show people make different choices on sunny versus rainy days. Weather affects mood, which affects risk assessment. Investment decisions, purchases, and judgments all shift based on temporary mood states that have nothing to do with actual risks. Hunger makes future predictions more negative. When you're hungry, problems seem worse and solutions seem less likely to work. The physical state influences mental forecasting in ways you don't recognize happening. This explains why decisions made in emotional states often get regretted later. Anger makes future conflicts seem inevitable. Excitement makes risks seem manageable. The mood passes, but the decision based on that mood remains. Your brain struggles to imagine feeling differently than you do right now. Current emotions feel permanent even though you know, rationally, that moods change. This empathy gap makes future predictions unreliable. Fact 53. Planning fallacy. Underestimates task completion. Time. You think this project will take 2 hours, but it actually takes 5. Planning fallacy makes people consistently underestimate how long tasks will take. You focus on the best-case scenario where nothing goes wrong. Delays, complications, and interruptions get ignored in the initial time estimates. This happens with projects of all sizes, from homework to construction. Almost everything takes longer than originally planned, yet people continue making optimistic estimates despite repeated experience with delays. You imagine the task going smoothly without obstacles. Your mental simulation skips over the problems that actually arise during execution. The plan represents ideal conditions that rarely match reality. Students underestimate paper writing time every semester. They've written papers before and no delays happen, but each new assignment feels different and manageable within the available time. Past experience doesn't correct future estimates. Major construction projects run over schedules so consistently that smart planners add buffer time. But even with experience, the initial estimates remain overly optimistic. The bias operates even among professionals who should know better. Your brain focuses on the steps you need to complete. It doesn't adequately account for the time between steps or the unexpected problems that inevitably emerge. The mental model is too simple and clean. Fact 54. How we ignore past delays in future estimates. Last time it took twice as long as planned, but this time will be different. Your brain treats each new project as unique, rather than learning from similar past experiences. Previous delays get explained away as special circumstances. This time you'll avoid those specific problems, so accurate estimation feels unnecessary. You remember that the last home renovation took months longer than planned, but that was because of the contractor or weather or supply issues. This renovation won't have those same problems. Each past failure gets dismissed as a special case. This selective memory protects the planning fallacy from correction. If you truly learned from past timing failures, you'd add significant buffers. Instead, you explain away each delay as a unique situation that won't repeat. People remember completing tasks but forget how long completion actually took. The struggle and delays fade while the accomplishment remains clear. This creates false confidence about future timing when comparing to sanitized past memories. Even when you explicitly recall past delays, you believe you'll work faster this time. More motivation or better planning will compensate. The optimism about your future performance overcomes the evidence from past performance. Organizations show this pattern repeatedly. Every software release or product launch takes longer than estimated, but the next estimate remains optimistic because this project has better planning or fewer complications anticipated. Fact 55. Illusion of control believes we influence randomness, You blow on dice because it feels like it helps. Illusion of control makes you believe you can influence outcomes that are actually random. Personal involvement creates a feeling of control even over chance events. This happens despite knowing logically that your actions don't affect probability. Gamblers demonstrate this constantly with rituals and superstitions. They have lucky machines or special techniques for pulling slots. These behaviors persist because occasional wins feel like confirmation of control rather than expected random variation. Lottery players choose their own numbers rather than quick picks. The choice feels meaningful even though odds are identical. Personal selection creates an illusion that you've influenced the outcome through your number choice. People press elevator buttons repeatedly as if additional presses make it arrive faster. The button already activated, but pressing again feels like doing something. Action creates the sensation of control over timing. This bias evolved because control usually does matter. Your actions typically influence outcomes in meaningful ways. The brain's control detection system produces false positives, seeing control where none exists rather than missing real control. Stock picking shows illusion of control among investors. Choosing specific stocks feels like exercising skill, but most investors would do better with random selection or index funds. The personal involvement creates false confidence about influencing market outcomes. Fact 56. Why people feel they can affect chance events. Your brain evolved to find cause and effect relationships everywhere. This pattern detection helped ancestors survive by learning what actions led to what results. But the system is oversensitive and finds connections even in random events. Action followed by outcome feels like causation. When you perform some ritual and then win, your brain connects them. The timing makes it seem like your action caused the result. Random coincidence gets interpreted as meaningful control over the outcome. Involvement creates the strongest illusion. Throwing dice yourself feels different than watching someone else throw. Physical participation makes the randomness feel less random. Your action seems to inject skill into pure chance. Effort also amplifies the illusion. Working hard to choose lottery numbers makes winning feel more deserved. The effort creates investment that your brain interprets as influence. Chance outcomes feel less random when you've invested energy. This explains why people prefer making their own choices in chance situations. Active participation feels better than passive acceptance. The illusion reduces anxiety about uncertain outcomes by providing false agency. Fact 57. Clustering illusion sees patterns in random data. 3 heads in. A row seems meaningful, but it's just randomness. Clustering illusion makes you see patterns in random sequences. Your brain detects structure where none exists. Random data naturally produces clusters that look non-random to human perception. Flip a coin 100 times and you'll see streaks. Multiple heads or tails in a row appear frequently in truly random sequences, but these clusters feel like they mean something. Your brain insists the pattern must have a cause. Sports fans talk about hot streaks when players perform well consecutively. Statistical analysis shows these are usually random variation. But the clustering creates powerful intuitions that the player has special momentum or flow going. Stock market patterns often represent clustering illusion. Charts show apparent trends that are actually random fluctuations. Investors see meaning and make trades based on patterns that don't predict future movement. Cancer clusters in neighborhoods trigger concern about environmental causes. Sometimes clusters do indicate real problems, but random distribution naturally creates geographic clustering. Some areas will have more cases purely by chance. Fact 58. How our brains detect meaning in noise. Random doesn't look random to human eyes and minds. Your brain actively searches for meaning in everything you perceive. This constant search finds patterns even in pure noise. Seeing structure feels more satisfying than accepting randomness as the explanation. White noise contains no patterns, but people hear voices or music in it. The brain fills in structure where none exists. This happens because pattern detection runs automatically without conscious control or awareness. Cloud shapes demonstrate this perfectly. Clouds form through random atmospheric processes, yet you see faces, animals, and objects easily. The brain imposes familiar patterns onto random formations constantly. Financial charts show this bias affecting serious decisions. Random price movements look like trends and patterns. Technical analysis finds shapes and formations that seem predictive. Most represent seeing meaning in market noise. Superstitions develop from detecting false patterns. Something good happens after you wear certain socks. The coincidence becomes a pattern that feels real. Random reinforcement actually strengthens beliefs more than consistent patterns would. Fact 59. Gambler's fallacy expects balance in random sequences. The coin landed heads 5 times, so tails must be coming next. Gambler's fallacy makes you expect random sequences to balance out in the short term. After several of one outcome, the opposite seems due. This feels intuitive but contradicts how probability actually works. Each coin flip has exactly 50-50 odds, regardless of previous results. The coin has no memory of past flips, but your brain expects patterns to even out quickly. Long-term averages get confused with short-term sequences. Roulette players bet against recent outcomes expecting correction. Black came up 5 times, so red must be coming. The wheel doesn't know or care what happened before. Each spin is completely independent. Lottery players avoid numbers that won recently. Those numbers seem less likely to repeat. But each drawing has identical odds. Past winners don't affect future probability at all in truly random systems. This fallacy costs gamblers enormous amounts of money. They increase bets after losses expecting wins to restore balance. The losses just compound because each bet faces the same unfavourable odds. Fact 60. Why past outcomes don't influence independent events. Each coin flip starts fresh with no memory of before. Independent events have probabilities that don't change based on history. The coin doesn't know it landed heads last time. The wheel doesn't remember recent numbers. Each event operates in isolation from all previous events. People struggle with this concept because many real-world events aren't independent. If you draw cards without replacement, past draws do affect future probabilities. Your brain applies this dependency logic to situations where it doesn't apply. Weather affects whether you bring an umbrella tomorrow. Past performance predicts future job success. Your brain learned these real dependencies. It overgeneralizes by applying the same logic to independent random events. The math of independent probability is straightforward but counterintuitive. Getting heads 10 times in a row doesn't make heads or tails more likely next time. The streak is unusual, but doesn't change the next flip's odds. This misunderstanding drives many gambling losses. People chase losses believing probability must balance. They think they're due for a win after repeated losses. Fact 61. Hot hand fallacy believes winning streaks continue. A basketball player makes 3 shots in a row, so the next one seems guaranteed. Hot hand fallacy makes you believe winning streaks will continue beyond what probability predicts. Success breeds expectations of more success. The streak feels meaningful rather than random variation. Sports fans see players as hot when they perform well consecutively. They expect the streak to continue and pass the ball accordingly. But statistical analysis shows most streaks are random. Past baskets don't predict the next shot. This contradicts gambler's fallacy in an interesting way. Sometimes you expect streaks to end and sometimes to continue. Your brain uses whichever feels right in the moment. The pattern depends on how you frame the situation. Investors show hot hand thinking with stocks. A company's stock rises several days running, and investors pile in. They assume momentum will continue. Often the streak was random and reverses unpredictably. Fact 62. How recent success creates false predictions. Winning once makes you feel like you'll win again. Recent success changes your predictions about future outcomes dramatically. One good result creates confidence about the next attempt. Your brain treats the success as evidence of skill rather than possible luck. Job candidates who succeed in one interview expect to succeed in the next. The confidence from winning carries forward. But each interview involves different people and circumstances. Past success doesn't guarantee future results. This explains why people stay at slot machines after winning. The recent success feels like the beginning of a pattern. They expect more wins to follow naturally. The machine is just operating on random programming unchanged by recent outcomes. Students who ace one test feel confident about the next without additional studying. The success creates false security. Each test requires preparation regardless of how the last one went. Your brain uses recent outcomes as shortcuts for prediction. This works when success truly indicates skill. It fails when outcomes involve substantial luck or changing circumstances. Fact 63. Projection. Bias assumes current preferences. Last forever. You're hungry now, so you buy too much food at the grocery store. Projection bias makes you assume your current state will persist into the future. How you feel now seems like how you'll feel later. This creates poor decisions about future needs and wants. Shopping while hungry leads to overbuying. Your current hunger projects forward, and you purchase for that state. Later, when you're full, half the food seems unappealing. The preference changed, but purchases didn't account for that. People commit to future social plans based on current mood. You agree to attend an event because you feel social today. When the event arrives and you feel tired, you regret the commitment made in a different state. Gym memberships get purchased during motivation peaks. You feel energetic and committed to fitness. Future you won't always feel that way. The membership goes unused because motivation wasn't permanent. Major purchases reflect current priorities that may shift. You buy a sports car while prioritizing fun. Later family needs make you regret not buying something practical. Fact 64. Why we can't predict our changing tastes. Your favorite food today might bore you next month. Tastes and preferences change over time in ways you can't anticipate. What seems permanently appealing now will shift. Your brain assumes stability that doesn't exist in actual preferences and desires. People buy bulk quantities of foods they currently love. 3 months later, they're sick of that flavor. The preference felt permanent, but was actually temporary. Variety-seeking behavior wasn't predicted. Music tastes demonstrate this clearly. Songs you play repeatedly become tiresome. New songs you initially dislike can become favorites. The trajectory of preference change is unpredictable from the starting point. Long-term commitments suffer from this prediction failure. You choose a career based on current interests. Years later, those interests have evolved. The commitment was made assuming static preferences that actually changed. Relationships involve changing attraction and compatibility over time. People marry based on current feelings. Those feelings shift as both people grow and change. The future relationship differs from what was predicted. Your brain has limited ability to simulate future preferences accurately. Current state dominates prediction, even though experience shows preferences change regularly and significantly. Fact 65. Empathy gap. Fails to understand. Different emotional states. When you're calm, you can't imagine being angry. Empathy gap makes you unable to predict or remember how different emotional states feel. Your current emotion seems like the only real one. Other states become abstract and distant even though you've experienced them before. People underestimate how they'll feel in emotional situations when currently calm. You think you'd act rationally under stress. But stress changes decision-making completely. The calm prediction doesn't account for emotional reality. This explains poor decisions made while emotional. Anger makes you say things calm you would never say. In the moment, the anger feels justified and permanent. Later, you can't understand why you acted that way. Hunger affects decision-making, but you forget this when full. Full, you think's hungry. You should just eat less. The physical state creates a cognitive gap. You can't access how hunger actually feels and influences thinking. Medical decisions get made while healthy that don't reflect preferences during illness. Advanced directives written while feeling good may not match actual wishes when seriously ill. The empathy gap creates a preference prediction error. Fact 66. How current feelings distort future state predictions. Your mood right now colors every prediction you make about tomorrow. Happy people predict happy futures while sad people expect sad outcomes. The current feeling gets projected forward as if permanent. This distortion affects everything from career choices to relationship decisions. Studies show people make different predictions in different emotional states about identical situations. Angry people expect conflict while calm people expect resolution. The content stays the same, but predictions flip based on current mood. This explains why you shouldn't make major decisions while emotional. Your predictions about how you'll feel later are distorted by how you feel now. Wait until the emotion passes for more accurate forecasting about future states and preferences. Fact 67. Impact. Bias overestimates emotional duration. You think breaking up will devastate you for years, but you recover in months. Impact bias makes you overestimate how long events will affect your emotions. Both positive and negative experiences impact you less durably than predicted. You adapt faster than you expect. People predict winning the lottery will make them happy forever. Research shows winners return to baseline happiness within a year. The emotional boost fades as you adapt to the new situation. Job loss feels catastrophic initially. You imagine permanent devastation. Most people find new jobs and recover emotionally within months. The impact was real but temporary despite predictions of lasting damage. This happens because you focus on the event while forgetting life continues around it. Other experiences dilute the emotional impact over time significantly. Fact 68. Why events affect us. Less long-term than expected life keeps happening and dilutes any single event's impact. You imagine focusing on one event continuously, but life doesn't work that way. Other experiences, relationships, and concerns demand attention. The big event becomes one among many rather than the only thing you think about. Psychological immune systems activate after negative events. Your brain finds ways to reframe and cope with bad outcomes. This resilience wasn't factored into your initial predictions about how devastated you'd feel. Positive events also fade through adaptation. Your new car feels special for weeks, then becomes normal. The brain habituates to improvements quickly. What seemed life-changing becomes background within months. People remarry after divorce they thought would ruin them. Students recover from rejections they thought were catastrophic. The prediction error is consistent across positive and negative events and outcomes. Fact 69. Focalism concentrates on single factors. Excessively. You imagine your new car will define your happiness completely. Focalism makes you focus on one aspect while ignoring everything else affecting outcomes. The single factor seems like it will determine everything. Other influences get forgotten in predictions. People think moving to a sunny climate will make them happy. They focus on weather while ignoring that work, relationships, and health matter more. The weather becomes background while other life factors dominate actual happiness. Salary increases seem like they'll change everything. You imagine the extra money will transform daily life. But most life circumstances stay the same. The raise affects less than predicted because you focus too narrowly. Sports fans think winning championships will bring lasting joy. The victory matters, but life continues with normal problems. The focus on one event ignores ongoing life complexity and reality. Fact 70. How ignoring context creates inaccurate predictions. You forget that dozens of other factors shape how you'll actually feel. Context matters enormously, but gets ignored in predictions. You imagine one variable changing while everything else stays constant. Reality involves multiple simultaneous changes that interact unpredictably. Accepting a new job means new commute, colleagues, and schedule. You focus on salary while ignoring these contextual factors. They end up mattering more than the single factor you concentrated on initially. Relationships involve context beyond just the other person. Where you live, career stress, and health all affect relationship satisfaction. Predictions focus on compatibility while ignoring situational factors that actually determine outcomes. Vacation predictions ignore that you bring yourself along. You imagine paradise will erase all stress. But your personality, habits, and concerns travel with you. The context of being you limits how much any location can change your experience. Fact 71. Curse of knowledge can't unknow what we've learned. Once you know something, you can't remember what not knowing felt like. The curse of knowledge makes experts forget how confusing topics were before they understood them. You can't recreate your beginner mindset. Everything seems obvious now that you know it. Teachers struggle with this constantly. Material that seems simple to them confuses students. The teacher can't access their own confusion from years ago. They skip steps that seem unnecessary but beginners actually need. This affects all communication between experts and novices. You assume others share your background knowledge. You use jargon without realizing it's unfamiliar. The curse makes you a poor judge of what needs explanation. Parents experience this watching children learn basic skills. Walking seems simple because you forgot learning it. Fact 72. Why experts struggle. Explaining to beginners, your expertise makes you blind to what beginners don't know. Experts have automated knowledge that operates below conscious awareness. They can't easily break down steps that have become instinctive. This makes teaching difficult despite deep understanding of the subject matter. A skilled driver doesn't think about each action while driving. Explaining to a learner requires conscious analysis of unconscious processes. The expert must reverse automation to communicate effectively with beginners. Technical fields show this problem clearly. Programmers write documentation assuming knowledge beginners lack. The expert can't identify which concepts need explanation. Everything connects in their mind seamlessly. This explains why the best teachers aren't always the top experts. Teaching requires remembering confusion and difficulty. Some people retain that beginner perspective better than others, despite achieving expertise. Fact 73. Illusion of transparency. Thinks others understand us. You believe your thoughts and feelings are obvious to everyone around you. Illusion of transparency makes you overestimate how well others understand your internal state. Your emotions feel visible, even though others can't actually read your mind. You think you're communicating clearly when you're not. People assume their sarcasm or jokes are obvious. The internal intent feels clear, so the external expression should be too. But others miss the tone and take statements literally because they lack your internal context. This creates communication problems in relationships. You think your partner should know you're upset. The internal feeling is so strong it seems impossible to hide. But others don't have access to your thoughts and need explicit communication. Presentations feel more nervous than they look. Your internal anxiety seems visible to the audience. Actually, they notice far less than you fear. Fact 74. How we overestimate our communication clarity. Your message makes perfect sense to you but confuses everyone else. You know what you meant to say, so the words seem clear. But listeners lack your internal context and interpretation. The gap between intended and received meaning is larger than you realize. Email demonstrates this problem constantly. Your tone seems obvious as you write. Recipients interpret the same words completely differently. The medium removes cues you assume are present in your message. Instructions you give seem perfectly clear. Others follow them incorrectly and you're frustrated. You didn't realize how much unstated knowledge your instructions assumed. The clarity existed only in your mind. Vague language feels specific when you have concrete examples in mind. Others don't have those examples. Your general statement means something precise to you, but something different to them entirely. Fact 75. Spotlight effect believes others notice us more. You think everyone noticed your bad haircut, but they barely looked. Spotlight effect makes you believe you're the center of others' attention. Your mistakes and flaws seem glaringly obvious. Actually, people are focused on themselves and barely notice you. Embarrassing moments feel like everyone will remember forever. You replay the incident constantly, but others forgot about it almost immediately. They were thinking about their own concerns instead. This causes unnecessary social anxiety. You worry about small imperfections in your appearance or behavior. Most people don't notice or care. They're too busy worrying about how they appear to others. Students giving presentations feel intensely watched. Every mistake seems magnified. The audience is actually distracted, checking phones or thinking about their own presentations. The spotlight exists mainly in your head. Fact 76. Why we think we're center of attention. Your own experience dominates your awareness completely. You live inside your head experiencing everything from your perspective. This makes your concerns feel universally important and noticeable. You can't easily adopt others' perspectives where you're barely a blip on their radar. Thinking about yourself constantly makes you assume others do too. You rehearse conversations and worry about impressions. It feels impossible that others aren't equally focused on analyzing you. Social media amplifies this bias. Posting content makes you hyper-aware of responses. You imagine everyone judging your posts. Most people scroll past without much thought or attention at all. This egocentrism is automatic and hard to overcome. Your experience is the only one you directly access. Taking others' actual perspective requires conscious effort that feels unnatural and difficult to maintain. Fact 71. Curse of knowledge can't unknow what we've learned. Once you know something, you can't remember what not knowing felt like. The curse of knowledge makes experts forget how confusing topics were before they understood them. You can't recreate your beginner mindset. Everything seems obvious now that you know it. Teachers struggle with this constantly. Material that seems simple to them confuses students. The teacher can't access their own confusion from years ago. They skip steps that seem unnecessary but beginners actually need. This affects all communication between experts and novices. You assume others share your background knowledge. You use jargon without realizing it's unfamiliar. The curse makes you a poor judge of what needs explanation. Parents experience this watching children learn basic skills. Walking seems simple because you forgot learning it. Fact 72. Why experts struggle. Explaining to beginners. Your expertise makes you blind to what beginners don't know. Experts have automated knowledge that operates below conscious awareness. They can't easily break down steps that have become instinctive. This makes teaching difficult despite deep understanding of the subject matter. A skilled driver doesn't think about each action while driving. Explaining to a learner requires conscious analysis of unconscious processes. The expert must reverse automation to communicate effectively with beginners. Technical fields show this problem clearly. Programmers write documentation assuming knowledge beginners lack. The expert can't identify which concepts need explanation. Everything connects in their mind seamlessly. This explains why the best teachers aren't always the top experts. Teaching requires remembering confusion and difficulty. Some people retain that beginner perspective better than others despite achieving expertise. Fact 73. Illusion of transparency thinks others understand us. You believe your thoughts and feelings are obvious to everyone around you. Illusion of transparency makes you overestimate how well others understand your internal state. Your emotions feel visible even though others can't actually read your mind. You think you're communicating clearly when you're not. People assume their sarcasm or jokes are obvious. The internal intent feels clear, so the external expression should be too. But others miss the tone and take statements literally because they lack your internal context. This creates communication problems in relationships. You think your partner should know you're upset. The internal feeling is so strong it seems impossible to hide. But others don't have access to your thoughts and need explicit communication. Presentations feel more nervous than they look. Your internal anxiety seems visible to the audience. Actually, they notice far less than you fear. Fact 74. How we overestimate our communication clarity. Your message makes perfect sense to you, but confuses everyone else. You know what you meant to say, so the words seem clear. But listeners lack your internal context and interpretation. The gap between intended and received meaning is larger than you realize. Email demonstrates this problem constantly. Your tone seems obvious as you write. Recipients interpret the same words completely differently. The medium removes cues you assume are present in your message. Instructions you give seem perfectly clear. Others follow them incorrectly and you're frustrated. You didn't realize how much unstated knowledge your instructions assumed. The clarity existed only in your mind. Vague language feels specific when you have concrete examples in mind. Others don't have those examples. Your general statement means something precise to you, but something different to them entirely. Fact 75. Spotlight effect believes others notice us. More. You think everyone noticed your bad haircut, but they barely looked. Spotlight effect makes you believe you're the center of others' attention. Your mistakes and flaws seem glaringly obvious. Actually, people are focused on themselves and barely notice you. Embarrassing moments feel like everyone will remember forever. You replay the incident constantly. But others forgot about it almost immediately. They were thinking about their own concerns instead. This causes unnecessary social anxiety. You worry about small imperfections in your appearance or behavior. Most people don't notice or care. They're too busy worrying about how they appear to others. Students giving presentations feel intensely watched. Every mistake seems magnified. The audience is actually distracted, checking phones or thinking about their own presentations. The spotlight exists mainly in your head. Fact 76. Why we think we're center of attention. Your own experience dominates your awareness completely. You live inside your head, experiencing everything from your perspective. This makes your concerns feel universally important and noticeable. You can't easily adopt others' perspectives where you're barely a blip on their radar. Thinking about yourself constantly makes you assume others do too. You rehearse conversations and worry about impressions. It feels impossible that others aren't equally focused on analysing you. Social media amplifies this bias. Posting content makes you hyper-aware of responses. You imagine everyone judging your posts. Most people scroll past without much thought or attention at all. This egocentrism is automatic and hard to overcome. Your experience is the only one you directly access. Taking others' actual perspective requires conscious effort that feels unnatural and difficult to maintain. Fact 77. False consensus effect assumes others share our views. You like coffee, so you assume most people do too. False consensus effect makes you overestimate how many people agree with you. Your opinions and preferences feel normal and common. Disagreement seems unusual rather than equally valid. This happens with everything from food preferences to political views. You surround yourself with similar people. This creates the impression that your views represent the majority position. Moral judgments show strong false consensus. Your ethical positions feel objectively correct. You assume reasonable people naturally agree. Actually, moral intuitions vary widely across individuals and cultures. Social media creates echo chambers that reinforce false consensus. You see your views reflected constantly. Algorithm-curated content makes your position seem universally accepted. Opposing views get filtered out. People are genuinely surprised when polls show different preferences than expected. Your circle agrees with you, so you projected that to the general population. Fact 78. How we overestimate agreement with our opinions. Your beliefs feel so obviously correct that disagreement seems strange. Your reasoning for beliefs happens internally and feels airtight. You've thought it through and reached the logical conclusion. Others must reach the same conclusion with proper thinking. This makes genuine disagreement feel like ignorance or bias. They must not understand the facts. If they knew what you know, they'd obviously agree. The possibility of legitimate different interpretation doesn't feel real. Political discussions demonstrate this clearly. Both sides think their position is obvious. Each believes the facts support them clearly. Disagreement proves the other side's irrationality, not the complexity of the issue. You selectively notice agreement and dismiss disagreement. Friends who agree validate your correctness. Those who disagree must have flawed thinking. This confirmation-seeking reinforces false consensus continuously. Fact 79. In-group bias favours. Members of our groups, you automatically trust people from your hometown more. In-group bias makes you favour people who share group membership. They seem more trustworthy, competent, and likeable. The shared identity creates positive assumptions without individual evidence. Sports team allegiance demonstrates this perfectly. Players on your team seem talented while opponents seem lesser. The jersey creates the judgment. Trade a player between teams and your opinion flips instantly. Work departments show in-group bias constantly. Your team's ideas seem better than other departments' suggestions. The merit of ideas matters less than which group proposed them originally. This bias extended to any categorization. School affiliation, nationality, or even arbitrary experimental assignments create preferential treatment. The human brain defaults to favoring similar others across all domains. Fact 80. Why we trust similar people. More shared background feels like evidence of trustworthiness. Similarity signals shared values and predictability. Someone like you probably thinks like you. This makes their behavior seem more understandable and less threatening than strangers. You assume people from your background won't harm you. The shared identity creates implicit alliance. This trust often exceeds what individual behavior actually warrants. Hiring shows in-group bias consistently. Managers favor candidates with similar backgrounds. Shared schools or hometowns boost hiring chances. The similarity feels like qualification even when it's irrelevant to job performance. This bias served evolutionary purposes. Cooperating with your group members increased survival. Outsiders posed potential threats. Modern diverse societies make this instinct less useful, but it persists automatically in social judgments. Fact 81. Outgroup homogeneity. Sees other groups as all alike. People from other groups all seem basically the same to you. Outgroup homogeneity makes you see less variety in groups you don't belong to. They blur together as one uniform mass. Members of your own group seem diverse and individual. Sports rivalries demonstrate this clearly. The opposing team's fans all seem identical and stereotypical. Your own team's fans are diverse individuals with unique personalities. The grouping creates perceived sameness. This happens with all social categories. Different generations, political parties, or nationalities seem homogeneous from outside. You notice subtle distinctions within your group, but miss them in others. The bias happens because you interact more with in-group members. You learn their individual differences through repeated contact. Out-group members remain superficial observations. Fact 82. How we perceive more diversity within our groups. Your friends are all unique, but those other people are basically identical. You know your group members personally and see their individual quirks. Each person has distinct characteristics that you've observed through familiarity. This detailed knowledge reveals diversity. Co-workers in your department seem varied in personality and skills. Employees in other departments seem interchangeable. You work closely with your team daily. You see other departments only superficially in meetings. This perception gap isn't about actual diversity differences. Both groups likely have similar internal variation. Your exposure level determines what you perceive. Familiarity reveals complexity, while distance creates simplification. The effect strengthens stereotyping of outgroups. When individuals seem identical, group-level generalizations feel accurate. You miss counterexamples because you don't notice individual variation that contradicts stereotypes. Fact 83. Just world hypothesis. Believes people get what they deserve. Good things happen to good people and bad things to bad people. Just world hypothesis makes you believe outcomes reflect what people deserve. Success indicates virtue while suffering suggests fault. This creates a sense that the world operates fairly. When someone experiences misfortune, you look for what they did wrong. They must have made poor choices or had character flaws. This protects your belief that bad things won't randomly happen to you. Poverty gets blamed on laziness rather than circumstance. Wealth indicates hard work rather than luck. The hypothesis makes outcomes seem earned rather than influenced by factors beyond individual control. This belief provides psychological comfort. Randomness is frightening. Believing that actions determine outcomes creates sense of control. Following rules will protect you from harm in this mental framework. Fact 84. Why we blame victims to maintain control beliefs. Blaming victims lets you believe you're safe from similar harm. When bad things happen to others, believing they caused it protects your sense of control. If they did something wrong, you can avoid that mistake. Randomness means you're vulnerable too. Assault victims get questioned about their choices. What were they wearing, or where were they walking? These questions seek reasons that distinguish the victim from you. Finding fault creates distance and safety. This victim blaming serves psychological self-protection. Acknowledging that careful people suffer random harm is terrifying. Believing victims made mistakes preserves your illusion of control over your safety. The bias makes suffering worse for victims. Not only did they experience harm, but others blame them for it. Social support gets withdrawn when people need it most. Fact 85. Negativity bias. Weighs bad information more heavily. One insult outweighs 10 compliments in your memory. Negativity bias makes negative information more impactful than positive. Bad experiences, words, and events dominate your attention and memory. Your brain treats negative as more important than positive consistently. Relationships need multiple positive interactions to outweigh one negative interaction. The ratio isn't 1-to-1. Research suggests 5 positive moments balance 1 negative moment. Bad weighs heavier psychologically. News focuses on negative events because your brain prioritizes them. Positive developments feel less urgent. This creates distorted views of reality skewed toward negativity and danger. Evolution explains this asymmetry. Missing a threat could kill you. Missing an opportunity just meant less benefit. Natural selection favored brains that prioritized negative information for survival. Fact 86. How negative experiences stick in memory longer. You remember the one rude customer, but forget 50 pleasant ones. Negative experiences get encoded more deeply in memory. They replay more vividly and last longer. Your brain dedicates more resources to processing and storing negative information. Bad first dates get remembered in detail while good dates blur together. The emotional intensity of negative experiences strengthens memory formation. Pleasant experiences feel nice but don't trigger the same encoding strength. This creates pessimistic memory biases. Your past seems more negative than it actually was. Pleasant moments fade while unpleasant ones remain sharp. This distorts your overall life satisfaction retrospectively. The bias affects learning too. Negative feedback sticks while positive feedback slides off. One criticism overshadows multiple compliments in shaping self-perception and future behavior patterns. Fact 87. Mere exposure effect increases, liking through familiarity. The song you hated at first becomes your favorite after hearing it repeatedly. Mere exposure effect makes you like things more simply from repeated encounters. Familiarity breeds preference rather than contempt. The more you see something, the more positively you feel toward it. Advertising exploits this relentlessly. Repeated brand exposure creates preference even without persuasive arguments. The name becomes familiar, which translates into positive feelings and purchase behavior. This works with people too. Co-workers you initially disliked often become friends through proximity. Regular exposure without negative interactions gradually builds liking. Familiarity reduces threat and increases comfort. The effect happens below conscious awareness. You don't realize familiarity is driving preference. The positive feelings seem like objective judgments about quality rather than results of repeated exposure alone. Fact 88. Why repeated encounters build preference. Seeing something multiple times makes your brain process it more easily. Processing fluency creates positive feelings. Familiar things require less mental effort to perceive. Your brain interprets this ease as evidence that the thing is good. New songs sound strange because your brain works hard, processing unfamiliar patterns. Repeated listening creates familiarity. The ease of processing on later listens feels pleasurable. This fluency gets mistaken for quality. Relationships benefit from regular contact for this reason. Seeing someone frequently makes interactions feel easier and more comfortable. The processing ease translates into liking even without particularly meaningful conversations. Marketing uses repetition to create fluency and preference. Brand names repeated across contexts become easy to process. This fluency makes products feel more trustworthy. Familiarity substitutes for actual knowledge about quality. Fact 89. Reactance resists when freedom feels threatened. Tell someone they can't have something and suddenly they want it desperately. Reactance makes you resist when you perceive threats to your freedom. Being told you can't do something makes you want to do it more. The restriction itself creates desire. Parents see this constantly with children. Forbidding something makes it instantly more appealing. The child wants to assert autonomy by choosing the forbidden option. Permission removes the appeal. Limited time offers create reactance by threatening freedom to buy later. The artificial deadline makes you feel pressured. You resist the pressure by buying now to maintain choice freedom. This explains why hard sell tactics often backfire. Aggressive. Persuasion feels like freedom, restriction. You resist by rejecting the option to reassert your autonomy and control. Fact 90. How restrictions make options more appealing. The forbidden fruit always looks sweetest. Restrictions transform ordinary options into desirable ones. The limitation creates scarcity and threatened freedom. Your brain responds by increasing the perceived value of what's restricted. Exclusive clubs attract people through restrictions. Members-only access makes participation seem valuable. Open access to the same amenities would feel less appealing. The restriction creates status and desire. Censorship makes content more interesting. Banned books get more attention than they would otherwise. The restriction signals importance and danger. People seek it out specifically because it's forbidden. Age restrictions make products attractive to younger people. Adults-only labels make things seem mature and sophisticated. The restriction itself becomes a selling point. You want access to prove you're qualified for the restricted category. Fact 91. Decoy effect introduces options to shift choices. Adding a third inferior option makes one of the original choices suddenly look better. The decoy effect manipulates preferences by introducing an asymmetrically dominated alternative. This new option is clearly worse than one original choice, but comparable to the other. It shifts your preference toward the dominating option. Movie theaters use this with popcorn pricing. Small costs $3 and large costs $7. Adding a medium for $6.50 makes the large seem like a better deal. The medium exists to make you buy large. The decoy doesn't need to be attractive itself. It just needs to make another option look comparatively better. Your brain uses relative comparisons rather than absolute value assessment. This works because you evaluate options against each other rather than independently. The context shapes perceived value completely. Fact 92. Why adding alternatives changes. Original preferences. Your choice between two options shifts when a third appears. Context. Dependency means preferences aren't stable internal values. They emerge from comparisons between available options. Adding or removing alternatives changes the entire decision landscape. Restaurant menus demonstrate this constantly. An expensive item makes moderately priced options seem reasonable. Without the expensive anchor, those same prices feel high. The comparison point changes your evaluation. Job offers get evaluated relative to each other. Accepting depends partly on what other offers exist. The same offer alone might be rejected but accepted when compared to worse alternatives available. This contradicts the idea of consistent preferences. You should value things independently. Actually, your brain constructs preferences on the spot using available comparisons. Context creates value judgments. Fact 91. Decoy effect introduces options to shift choices. Adding a third inferior option makes one of the original choices suddenly look better. The decoy effect manipulates preferences by introducing an asymmetrically dominated alternative. This new option is clearly worse than one original choice but comparable to the other. It shifts your preference toward the dominating option. Movie theaters use this with popcorn pricing. Small costs $3 and large costs $7. Adding a medium for $6.50 makes the large seem like a better deal. The medium exists to make you buy large. The decoy doesn't need to be attractive itself. It just needs to make another option look comparatively better. Your brain uses relative comparisons rather than absolute value assessment. This works because you evaluate options against each other rather than independently. The context shapes perceived value completely. Fact 92. Why adding alternatives changes original preferences. Your choice between two options shifts when a third appears. Context. Dependency means preferences aren't stable internal values. They emerge from comparisons between available options. Adding or removing alternatives changes the entire decision landscape. Restaurant menus demonstrate this constantly. An expensive item makes moderately priced options seem reasonable. Without the expensive anchor, those same prices feel high. The comparison point changes your evaluation. Job offers get evaluated relative to each other. Accepting depends partly on what other offers exist. The same offer alone might be rejected but accepted when compared to worse alternatives available. This contradicts the idea of consistent preferences. You should value things independently. Actually, your brain constructs preferences on the spot using available comparisons. Context creates value judgments. Fact 93. Normalcy. Bias underestimates disaster. Likelihood. People ignore evacuation warnings because disasters happen to other people. Normalcy bias makes you underestimate the probability and impact of disasters. You assume things will continue functioning normally. This prevents appropriate preparation or response to warnings. Hurricane warnings get ignored by people who've never experienced one. Their normal experience doesn't include disasters. The brain defaults to expecting continuation of normal patterns. This bias delays emergency responses. People wait to see if things really are serious. The assumption of normalcy causes dangerous delays in evacuating or seeking shelter. The bias feels rational because disasters are statistically rare. Most warnings don't result in actual disasters, but this reasoning fails for the occasions when disaster actually arrives. Fact 94. How we assume things will continue. Normally tomorrow will probably be like today and yesterday. Your brain uses recent experience to predict the future. Normal patterns feel permanent. Dramatic changes seem unlikely even when warnings suggest otherwise. Financial markets show this before crashes, rising. Prices feel normal and sustainable. Warnings of bubbles get dismissed because recent experience shows only growth. The pattern feels like it will continue indefinitely. People maintain routines despite approaching hurricanes or other threats. Going to work seems normal, so they do it. The recent pattern of normalcy overrides abstract warnings about coming changes. This reliance on recent patterns usually works well. Most days are similar to the previous day. But the bias fails catastrophically during the rare times when patterns break suddenly and dramatically. Fact 95. Ostrich effect avoids negative information. Actively. You don't check your bank account after a shopping spree. The ostrich effect makes you avoid information that might be unpleasant. You stick your head in the sand rather than confronting negative data. Ignorance feels better than knowing bad news. Investors check portfolios more frequently when markets rise than when they fall. Losses hurt to see even though checking doesn't change the reality. Avoidance protects mood temporarily. Medical test results get delayed when you fear bad news. Not knowing feels safer than potentially learning something frightening. This avoidance can make health problems worse by delaying treatment. The effect is paradoxical because information doesn't change reality. Your finances or health are what they are regardless of whether you check, but knowing makes it psychologically real and immediate. Fact 96. Why people ignore. Threatening financial or health data. Bad news feels real only when you acknowledge it. Avoiding information creates psychological distance from problems. As long as you don't check, you can maintain hope that things might be okay. Confirmation makes problems concrete and unavoidable. Credit card debt grows when people avoid looking at statements. Not seeing the total lets them continue spending. Checking forces confronting the problem which feels painful. Health symptoms get ignored until they become severe. Seeking diagnosis means potentially facing serious illness. Avoiding doctors maintains the possibility that nothing is seriously wrong. This avoidance provides short-term emotional relief at long-term cost. Problems worsen without attention. Early intervention could help, but only if you engage with the information rather than avoiding it actively. Fact 97. Default effect accepts pre-selected options. Automatically. Most people stick with whatever box came pre-checked. The default effect makes pre-selected options much more likely to be chosen. People accept defaults rather than actively choosing alternatives. The path of least resistance wins. Organ donation rates vary dramatically based on default choice. Countries with opt-out systems have much higher donation rates. The default determines outcomes more than personal preferences. Retirement savings depends heavily on defaults. Automatic enrollment increases participation dramatically. People intend to save but don't actively choose unless the default does it for them. Software settings rarely get changed from defaults. Most users accept whatever came preset. This gives default setters enormous power over outcomes and user behavior. Fact 98. How passive choices reveal decision-making laziness. Making a choice requires effort, so you often just don't. Active decision-making takes mental energy. Evaluating options, comparing features, and choosing deliberately feels effortful. Accepting defaults requires zero energy expenditure. This isn't stupidity, but efficient energy conservation. Your brain has limited resources. Spending them on every small decision would cause constant exhaustion. Defaults handle minor choices automatically. Companies exploit this by making preferred options the default. They know most people won't expend effort to change settings. The default becomes the actual choice for the majority. This reveals how much of behavior is passive rather than active choice. You think you're choosing, but often you're just not unchoosing the default. True active decisions are rarer than you realize. Fact 99. Cognitive biases operate below conscious awareness. You don't feel biased while your biases are actively influencing you. Biases work automatically in the background of your thinking. They shape judgments before conscious reasoning begins. You experience only the final output, not the biased process. This invisibility makes biases powerful and persistent. You can't catch yourself being biased in the moment. The biased thought feels like objective perception or logical conclusion. Education about biases helps only modestly. Knowing about confirmation bias doesn't make you feel it happening. The automatic processing remains invisible even with knowledge. This is why DBEing is so difficult. You can't fight processes you don't experience. The bias shapes your thought before you're aware thinking is happening. Conscious reasoning happens downstream from the bias. Fact 100. Understanding biases helps improve decision-making quality. Knowing about biases creates opportunities to counteract them systematically. While you can't eliminate biases, awareness enables system-level corrections. You can design decision processes that compensate for known biases. External rules substitute for impossible self-awareness. Checklists counteract overconfidence and planning fallacy. Forced consideration of alternatives fights confirmation bias. Statistical base rates override representativeness heuristic. Seeking opposing opinions compensates for in-group bias. Cooling off periods reduce emotional decision-making. Written criteria prevent shifting standards and post hoc justification. The goal isn't bias-free thinking, which is impossible. The goal is better outcomes through systematic bias recognition and correction. Understanding these mental patterns is the first step toward making decisions that serve your actual interests and long-term goals rather than following automatic mental shortcuts.